Hello, everyone, and welcome. Praise be to Renna, the thorn unbound, crimson witch of the rift. Welcome to the Sip and Spill for Renna, the crimson witch of the rift. I'm the hostess of the Lotus Cafe, Empress Tiramisu, a 3D generalist and game dev in training, as well as a Predecessor Guild content creator and Season 1 Creator Guild Cup champion. Now, before we get into anything, some housekeeping. This video is not a guide on how to play Renna or about whether she's overpowered or not. There are a plethora of videos covering all sorts of topics about her builds and the best lane to play her in and the best way to play her in by a ton of talented creators at the time of this recording covering those topics. This video is more about her gameplay and its feel, about her design, the VFX, and the current, if we choose to do so, her current skins. It's just about her abilities and feel overall. And that's how we're approaching this. If any of that stuff sounds really good to you and sounds interesting, then please grab a drink, a snack, and let's get spilling. Today, I'm just drinking some simple Folgers roasted coffee with some pumpkin spice creamer in it because it's that season. Anyway, I'll see you on the flip side. Before we can discuss design, we have to talk about her lore. We have to know where she comes from. We have to discuss the intention, and that intention is laid out before us via her background and lore. You can read this for yourself on the universe page of the Predecessor website, which will be linked below somewhere, but we'll brief over it. Renna, like her sister Yurei, was trained from a young age to take on the role of Koru Shinzo. However, unlike her sister, she was looked down upon for not being as skilled, as talented, or as focused. She was not the favored one, so to speak. This shunning and neglect would lead her to seeking other paths of power. If they did not believe she was strong enough, she would show them instead. This would culminate into her discovering an artifact that put her in touch with the Demon King of Ashkarath himself, Acheron, and by extension, infuse her with the same deadly rift magic she was originally trained to combat. Now, as the Demon King's right hand, she combats her sister and continues to amass power. To what end? We don't know. You'll have to find out more by watching the universe story, Thorn Unbound, the Sermon of the Crimson Dawn, as well as the Renna hero page. Moving on, we can now go into talking about her actual physical design. Now we know Renna now that we know where Renna comes from and her motives, we can really dive into her look and, ask ourselves, does it match up with that history? Does it match up with that lore and what has been stated about her character? Well, we'll find out. Renna comes to us clad in what some would call a Gunnar pimp fit. What we're actually seeing from top to bottom, from bottom up, sorry, includes heeled, steel-toed, thigh-high pirate-style boots, disguised by a crimson lace-up outer layer that elevate the boot from just below the mid-thigh to well above it. Here, at the medius part of the thigh, she's got two large tattoos that are semi-obscured. Above that, she wears a strapless crimson leotard that has a breast-hugging V-cut to show off her cleavage and more demonic tattoos. Layered with tight straps that snatch her waist, and attached to it is a three-way split butt cape that ends with black pleated trim. On the back of this layer of straps dangles a charm shaped like the essence that drops from her in-game passive. To wrap up this part of the look, she sports an open back, cropped black vampire collar vest. Um, and we'd be cast into Ashkarath itself for not mentioning the grotesque demon eye on her back, exposed through the back of her vest, a sign of the Demon King's influence. Moving to her arms are a pair of detached crimson puff sleeves, tapered and cuffed at the bottom by black leather, and dangling off their back is a strip of crimson black fabric. Black leather straps zigzag down the rest of the arm into crimson wrist wraps held together by black leather and spikes. Her fingers are covered by sharp, long silver metal claws. Her long, silvery white hair is styled in double fishtail braids hanging forward over her shoulders. Demonic horns sprout from her temples, with one pierced by a pair of what looks like pins, and the other having its tip broken off. A crimson, worn down boater hat sits lopsided and pierced by one of her horns on her head. Finally, closing out her look are dark crimson lips, red eyes, and various demonic face markings to complete this absolutely unhinged look. She also carries a cane that bears a head ornament similar to the very eye manifested on her back as her conduit of power. When you combine what we know of her background, this base skin design, we when we combine what we know of her background and this base skin design, we come together to form what looks like the Wicked Witch of the Crimson. Combine this with her idol animation, and we get a character who is very sure of herself and the power that she controls. Quite a few people have commented, though. She just appears very deranged. Just everything from her idol animations to some of the lines in which she speaks gives off a very unstable personality. Very much like she wants to throw you and everyone around her into the nearest pit if that means that she'll be entertained, if only for a moment. The design is quite strong in terms of silhouette and bold color choice. At the risk of sounding very elementary, because like I said, I'm still in the learning phase myself, so I don't know everything there is to know. Um, it does follow some what I understand to be very basic character design like fundamentals or rules, such as the lack of rounded shapes and the edges in her design. There are a lot of triangular, sharp pieces that show she is cunning and most likely an evil or not so good aligned character. At least again, this is like on a basic understanding level. Though let's be honest, becoming the right hand of the Demon King has got to take some serious guts and brains to not just get crushed and then, passed on. Because any character could have come to Acheron and been like, I want to worship you and praise you and be your right hand. And if they didn't have the skills to back that up, I'm pretty sure he would cast them into the pit and be like, all right, next. Um, but it also says something that like she was bold enough to, or rather, she is bold enough to roam around the demon plains, provided that's where she tends to hang out until something happens. Um, and wherever she pleases within that realm without any armor. Her design lacks armor. And she believes and knows her magic is strong enough to deal with whatever threat she encounters. Again, you don't become the demon's right hand because he just, he was feeling that day. Um, and I think that also speaks to her magery, because given that her role in the game is a mage, she obviously doesn't want to wear armor. If you look across the roster, there's only about, maybe off the top of my head, about two mid lane mages who actually don some form of armor. And that's mainly based on where they come from. I believe it's actually three, but that's mostly based on where they come from. For me though, the most striking thing will always be the eye on her back. I think that's like the biggest talking point. Whether this is a side effect of her pact with Acheron or, you know, an optional thing she wanted to do because she could, we won't know exactly. What we do know is that the combination of her overall appearance, with because of the combination of her overall appearance, this character Renna, might not have a redemption arc in her future. It looks like she's kind of just on that side of, yeah, no, I'm evil and I do this because I have the power to now, and you're all beneath me. And I really, in a small way, as much as I enjoy her, I really hope she doesn't have a redemption arc. I hope that, like, as we continue to produce and grow the story of Predecessor, obviously, you know, if you're around any game for any length of time, especially games like League of Legends or even Smite, over time, stories do change and evolve. Characters don't where we meet characters or where we're introduced to characters is not where they stay. If the game is organically pushing its story forward in order to introduce more characters or justify in-game mechanics, eventually even older characters have to move along that narrative as well. And there is a small potential for characters like Renna, because of the ties to the current characters that exist in our canon. There's a small potential that Renna could receive a redemption arc, and my hope is that she does it. Sometimes it's nice to have a character just be evil, you know, even it could be a justified evil, that's fine. But sometimes I think it's okay for characters to just be evil. And I think that's what, like, Renna really exemplifies, both with her design and, like, personality and what we know of her background. Um, but you know, there is also another side where there's a small shame because you would hope she and her sister Yurei would have a moment to reach some kind of understanding. And obviously we'll explore Yurei at some point, but you would hope that maybe there's a glimpse, there's like a small glimpse where her and her sister will come together and realize that everything that's led up to where they are today, the women that they are today, has just been this huge misunderstanding, you know, because of powers that be. Um, but you know, like I said, where we meet characters, not how they stay forever. And to be fair, the story is just beginning. And maybe we could see some kind of like development where that path of redemption or at least momentary sisterly bonding and reaching of understanding, you know, does open up unexpectedly. It could happen. But I'm curious if y'all think it could happen. Would that be something that y'all would actually enjoy? You know, that's the big question, because obviously the powers that be will have the direction that they might want to take the story, but also if we as the community say, hey, maybe not that way. You know, obviously within reason, you have to do this within reason. You can't just be like, I don't like it because I don't like it. It has to be like within proper reason, you know. um but it's like, you know, based on what we know so far, could Renna be redeemed? Do we want her to be redeemed? Is that something we would want as a community, as consumers and enjoyers of the current narrative? Is that something we could want? um but I digress. I think my favorite thing about Renna, well, actually two favorite things, is one, her claw, because I'm a sucker for the like metal claw nail moment. Just I love me some bonus finger claws. I absolutely love it. I don't know the exact name of the like particular accessory, but my god, is it cut. It is one of my favorite design elements for like warrior women, you know, women in power. Absolutely, I I'm a sucker for that. I've been trying to find some IRL for myself because I should have a pair. The other thing is, of course, the demonic tattoo. I know I did mention the eye and how that's just like a strong talking point, but like I really love the tattoos. They add so much to, they add so much interest to her character. And, compared to her sister Yurei, who, like I said, we'll get to someday, Renna's skin is like smooth, untouched by battle scars. The only things that are present on her body is, again, the grotesque eye on her back and these tattoos, you know, which, you would probably like in a like gameplay sense, you're like, well, she's a mage, of course she's not going to be in the thick of battle, she's not going to have battle scars, she's going to do her best to avoid engaging an enemy, head to head, face to face type thing. But you know I don't know, I just it adds the tattoos add a different kind of flair to it, because we know Renna has definitely seen combat, we know she's been engaged in combat, but her skin is just so smooth, and these tattoos are present to let you know that, like, oh, there's some mystical juju going on with this one. um but they speak, her lack of like body scars in place of these tattoos really does speak to the fact that she's not a frontliner. She sits back, lets others handle the dirty work, and then comes in and reaps the benefits. um And on that topic, speaking of that, let's dive into her gameplay a little bit. Yeah, I think it's about time we go gameplay.
A tip just for you.
Switching it up, we got ourselves some water. Always make sure you have water nearby. Drink your water. Um, and let's talk about some Renna gameplay, shall we? At the time of this script's weaving, it's no secret that the community has been uh, waiting on a true mid laner since the release of Argus. In addition to that, should she slip into your matches, you are now on a timer before her stacks balloon out of control, and your HP bar vanishes with a snap. Probably, I dare say she's probably one of the more polarizing heroes added to the game to date. And mind you, Yurei was released. Um, but I say that in the sense of playing as her makes you feel powerful. As like, especially as the game goes on and those matches, that match timer spins up and the stacks are building. Um, and playing against her puts a lot of pressure on you to outperform her before she reaches critical mass. Um, and like I said, mind you, Yurei still exists. Yurei is still, at the time of this recording, probably sitting at 100% ban rate in ranked games. Also, at the time of this script's construction, Renna has received her first balance pass as of patch 1.7.3, which was August 6th, 2025. I'll also include the link to those patch notes below so you can read over the exact changes yourself. But putting it bluntly, let's actually talk about Renna's gameplay. She is a scaling mid lane mage who amasses her power over the course of a game using her passive Echoes of the Damned. Every ability she has is affected by the amount of essences she has collected. She gains essence guaranteed from hero kills and at a chance from nearby deaths of monsters and minions. She does not have to get the kill on these monsters and minions for a stack to drop. If you remember, from her physical design, we talked about the essence that dropped look just like the trinket that's hanging off the back of her waist bandage belt, um, which is a nice callback, and it in a way raises a question for me: what exactly even is an echo? And is what about the one that she carries? Is that her own echo? Is that just the echo of somebody who fell and she was like, "Ooh, that looks like a cute accessory. Let me put it on there." But like, what exactly is an echo? We know for the most part these are classified as like the souls of people who perish, but like, why is it called an echo of the damned? Small thing to keep in the back of the mind. From her passive though, we move on to her basic attack actually. It's called Vow, and in my opinion, one of the smoothest feeling basic attacks among the mages. And that probably sounds really weird because you might be sitting there like, no, I think X mage has a better feeling basic attack because I can build them as like a carry, like howitzer for example. You used to see a lot of like howitzer carry. Um, but purely personally, from like the animation standpoint, you can like tell that slinging this like magical bolt of energy requires like a full body physicality from her. There's just something that's just like really smooth about it, just really like, yeah, like you feel like you're really like slinging it you know um and it does in a way remind me a bit of like Gideon, who when he does his basic attacks, he does put some oomph in it, but it's mostly like in the like from the upper body. And I know this is probably mainly because she's floating, but like she puts her whole body into it. Like she's like, yeah, it's like really slinging it. um Next up we have her bread and butter her bread and butter alternate ability, Soulfire. This sees her spin the cane to release piercing waves of energy. The more essence, the more waves. Talk about putting people in a blender. It's a mix of purples, reds, pinks, and peach colors, um, making the ability very vivid, but not too bright that it's overwhelming both the person being hit by it and the user. Um, and like especially towards the late game where the cooldown can hit like 4 or so seconds, depending on your build, you become capable of spamming it. Essentially it basically replaces your basic attack at that point. Um so like while there's this like glowing effect on her hand as she uses it, I would have loved if it was more attached to the cane, as that that's the artifact that strongly ties Renna to the Demon King, and I would have loved to see a bit more like emphasis on it. Not saying, again, not saying it should like outshine her, or muddy up clarity and whatnot, but like it just, I feel like it should like the power of this ability is being channeled from the cane. I would love the cane to be more like visual. I would love to see more attention drawn to the cane, because it's like she's literally like shoving the cane in your face and being like, demonic waves upon ye. Rend your soul. But following this, we have her primary ability, Coil. She lobs out a soul orb that manifests into a demonic spawnling that pulls in nearby enemies while dealing damage. Um, its radius grows with more essence. I really like this ability personally. This is probably my favorite ability in her whole kit. Um, and it's an orb with a bunch of little mouths on it, encased in this like purple glowy energy. And they suck these little mouths, like they suck things in. They're little, they do the sucking thing. I don't know. There's something visually just satisfying about watching her lob it, and then it explodes into this orb. I don't know. I don't know how to really describe how like it does something to my brain where it like gets in the folds and just like satisfactory scratching. Mm. Um, it's it's the orb and the area and everything, and just the visuals of the ability is that like it's big enough that it gives you like when you see it go out and it's like it's there like in the middle of the lane or in the middle of a fight, it makes you pause and be like, whoa, okay, better not step in that, I might actually die. um and I forgot to also mention it does have an execute attached to it when enemies fall below a certain health threshold. So you definitely don't want to step into this if you're low health or if a team fight's happening and your health is getting dangerously low. You want to try to avoid it at all, stepping into it at all costs. I've oftentimes seen a lot of people stand in it and then perish, and then they're like, oh no, she does so much damage, but it's like you were low health and standing in a damaging ability that has an execute. Um, but I like its threat level is different from like a Murdoch trap, right? It feels less of like a slight inconvenience. Well, not to say that like Murdoch traps are specifically just a slight inconvenience because you step in one at the wrong time, suddenly you're getting descended upon because it's enough CC to give the enemy jungler or the support time to use their CC, and you explode. But like it feels like a serious like danger zone, right? Like a Murdoch trap can't decimate you if you have enough health. I've seen it. I've seen people accidentally walk backwards into a Murdoch trap and explode. But like this ability, just like it actively feels like a danger. If that makes, I hope that makes some kind of sense. It's like an active danger zone as opposed to the Murdoch trap where you hope somebody wanders into it. Um, but you know, I think I think personally, from like if I had to critique the ability in some way, I would have loved purple skulls or something encircling it, right? Because in the key art, which I'll probably flash on screen, in the key art of the season's reveal, we see her and Yurei face to face with these floating skulls. And Yurei's kit, the skulls come out when she severs an enemy's soul, but the skull motif is missing entirely from the Renna design. And this is obviously me making an assumption. This is not like, oh, Amita said it would be X, Y, and Z. No, this is simply me based upon the key art. I would have assumed that both women would have had an ability that would put those skulls out there. Again, Yuri does it when she severs a soul, attaches big glowing green skull to the enemy that you can hit. I would have loved to see that. I would have loved to see Renna's abilities produce that same skull, and I think this would have been the perfect ability for that because you could demonic spawnling, and then it's like a circle, a small circle of maybe two, three of these purple demon skulls just kind of like encircling it as it like sucks in enemies and deals its damage. But I would assume that the reason that it wasn't done, and maybe for all I know, it could have been one of the iterations. But I'm going to assume it wasn't done that way for clarity's sake, because there's already a lot of effects happening on the battlefield, and the last thing you want to do is, add too many more to where okay, no one can really tell what's happening at the moment, and that's understandable. Um, there's enough decode and like I said, a lot of stuff going on in the battlefield as it currently. So I can understand why it might have been omitted. Um, there's also the first ability in her kit where there's some unique auditory uniqueness. Now, I'm not a sound engineer by like any stretch of the imagination, so I don't know like the specifics, the nitty gritty. But when the mortal coil is active, it sounds like somebody gasping for air a little bit, which I assume is also in sync with its pulling effect. Ooh, excuse me. And if that's the case, that's a nice touch to what I consider an otherwise very nice and clean ability. If that is the case, it does this
Only
like
makes it
I don't know if that
worse.
even comes across the mic, but like that's what it sounds like continuously with like a lowered pitch, or it would be a heightened pitch. I'm not sure which. Again, not a sound engineer, but if that is the case, I absolutely love that because the mouths on the rotating ball, I would assume, would be sucking in whatever's close by, right? Um, Personally, I think I would have also liked the hauntingness of it to be upped a little bit more. Um, like really lean into it being a demonic spawnling, mostly like manifested from like a collection of, souls in agony or something. That's my other critique. If we weren't gonna lean into the magical demon skull motif and go this route instead and like stay on this route, I would have loved a bit like her. She's not, her design isn't supposed to be about horror, right? But I would have loved to get that, like, I don't know, pained scream from it more or something. I don't know, something to like, you know send it just a bit. It, like, I'm not saying it's bad by any means. I think it's a really cool thing. I think where it's at right now is really cool. But just that, there's that extra bit of extra. More is more. um but we've also got one more stop before her ultimate, and that's secondary ability. Stupor. Also another ability that's a close second for me. This causes her to fly up into the air and ready a projectile as she floats down, or whatever direction you input. Before hitting the ground, she will launch a projectile that, upon hitting an enemy, will mesmerize them. And if you don't know what a mes is, it basically just, you lose control of your character and they walk towards the source of mesmerization. Um, Here we have another instance where the staff glows, but it's not necessarily that important because most likely she'll be above you when she's using this, so you're not going to really be able to see her anyway. Um, but what's really important about this ability, and the thing that I want to point out the most, because I don't know if most people notice that, but the projectiles coming from the staff itself. If you kind of don't pay any attention to it, you just think she's shooting like three little cutesy orbs that like explode and then, meds you. But what's actually, when you look closer at them, they're actually heart shaped, and I think that's the most amazing detail. Like, paying like real close attention to detail like that, because they literally could have just let her shoot some orbs and that's that. But not only is the projectile, are the spiraling heart projectiles that are shot, um not only are they heart shaped, the explosion that that is left behind when the hearts make impact, that explosion cloud is also heart shaped. And for a bit, I just thought it was like a regular, like, cloud, like a regular kind of like almost mushroomy, oblong kind of cloud, but it's actually heart shaped when you like stare at it long enough. If you get hit by it, you most likely probably don't notice it. But I think that's just such a cute, not even cute. That's such an important detail because something about Renna's design is that she has this like sultry vibe to her, but it's not the same way that like Countess has a sultry vibe. This is more of like a cocky, like, you know a cocky, like, I want you kind of sultry vibe, as opposed to come hither. Oh man, I want them to continue really doing this because I think it's an element of her character. I don't think a lot of people know. Like, obviously, people see her design and they might see the butt cape and they see her assets and they're like, okay, whatever. But include, like, really working those into her kit. I think working it into a facet of her kit is super strong for character identity, and really speaks to her, because so far we have Soulfire that lets so far of the abilities we've gone through, she's able to pull a demonic spawnling out from hell and have it suck and munch. You know, she's able to shoot, she's able to fire these waves of like hellfire energy. So we know from those two things that she's affiliated with hell and that she's powerful. But also with this ability with stupor and like again the visual design elements, we also know that she has this like very like sultry, you know, not like sexy cockiness, like ooh look at my body sexy, but like a I'll step on you and make you pay for it kind of sexy. I don't know how else to really put it, but hopefully y'all know what I'm getting at. Hopefully, and like if we really want to take it there, we can also say this is another aspect of her being Acheron's right hand. That's my yeah. We can also say it's another aspect of her being Acheron's right hand, right? She could also, you know, she could also be someone who lures people to make deals with her in order to fuel Acheron and become part of a pact or become part of his army or whatever secret army she might be amassing. So I think this really, really ties into several elements of her visual design and like I said, identity, character identity. So you can almost think of this ability as like her like I said, her way of like luring. If you didn't want to like think of it like, oh, she's like sexy sultry, you could still go in this route of like, oh, she also lures in others with this promise of power, only to then, you know, vanish them and consume their echo. That's also another plausible thing. But I'll leave y'all to marinate on that because we move over to the final ability, the ultimate, the piece de resistance, as it were. And without a doubt, probably the most controversial part of her kit, um, her ultimate, the Abyssal Rift. With this ability, she channels for a moment, summoning a demonic eye, then blinks to it, blinks to its location, where it shoots everything around it for a few seconds. As she gains more essence, the duration of this increases. Now, before we get into the visuals of it, we have to say peace. I want to say that I call this controversial because mechanically, she can cast this ultimate, then pop the stasis crest, Epoch, and have it continue to go off. Of course, the caveat is that she can't move in stasis, so the general area, you know, the general area denial and damage of it stay, you know, just of it just like staying for a small amount of time is a pain point for many players. She can essentially deny a whole area the longer the game goes on because of the like essence, because of collecting the essence and the scaling. On top of the fact that anyone below 30% health takes 50% more damage from it. A skilled Renna also knows that during the channel you want to like look up and have it blink you up into the sky, combine it with your the slow falling aspect of your passive, which would force enemies to have to look up at you to hit you and hopefully, you know, kill you before your ult kills them. However, that means they're not paying attention to your allies who might be running to them from below, who might be running at them from below you. Um, and on top of all of, if that wasn't already a lot to kind of digest, you also have to understand that the only time that you can interrupt her is during that channel. So before she blinks to the location that she is aiming at with her ultimate, the only time you can interrupt her is during that moment with a stun, with a silence. Because once that blink goes off, there's nothing stopping it. And I believe that most of this is because like the stasis trick, the she can't be silenced or CC'd out of it is mainly because, and I could be corrected if I'm wrong, but I do believe that like it's because Renna herself isn't stuck performing an animation after the channel. The channel is the only part of her actually doing something for the ult. She can move freely, cast all her other abilities while the ult is going off, because it's coming from uh a different thing. A different entity. That's the word I'm looking for. It's coming from a different entity. In contrast to Gideon or Countess, where if you were to stasis mid ult, it would cancel their ultimates due to the fact that they physically need to be performing an action that locks them out of other actions. So when Countess goes in and does her, her stab, she can't also spin and shadow slip during that, because her and the target are locked into this animation. She's locked into jumping up or leaping up and doing the stab. So if you stasis before that stab completes, you interrupt your ultimate. Gideon, when he channels his ultimate, he has to, ooh, my tummy hurts. Oh, I'm releasing all that gas. Oh, he has to do that. So when you stasis, because he's whatever animations he's doing to do the rift and hold the rift open, he you effectively cancel it. Same thing with howitzer. You're up in the air, you're shooting rockets. You stasis it. You're not while Howie in and of himself, the rabbit, monkey, whatever skin you're using, is shooting the rockets from the mech, you're stasising the whole thing. By extension, that means you're also stasising your own projectile shooting out of you, and thus by extension canceling your own ult. So I think that's why Renna is able to free cast her ability without, or she's uninterruptible during her ultimate, because she doesn't have to perform any other action other than that initial startup time for the blink. And like I said, I could be wrong, as I don't work for Omida, so I don't know the actual logistics and can only make like assumptions as to why it works the way that it does. Now visually, the ultimate could use more flare. Oh god, please don't come for me. The giant eye that hovers above her is like, it's bursting with soul fire. And like, damn near consumed and just like composed of it, you might as well say. Then, of course, any enemies that come near it are hit by a blast of like this like similarly colored energy. It looks like a souped up version of her basic attack, Vow. Um, but it's got a bit more like red and orange mixed in, more like a more vibrant red and orange mixed into it. And that's kind of just the ultimate, right? Like that's kind of just it. I would have expected more. Like you look at the rest of her kit and you're like, ooh, okay, she's probably got like a really like ult. She's really got like a, ooh, okay. She's up in here wearing crimson. She got the kinky boots, and she's shooting demonic spawnlings, blasting soulfire, and then she ults, and it's just that, I'm not saying it's disappointing. It's just a giant eye that shoots lasers to things that come near her. I don't know. I feel like for such a character who's a little bit deranged, I would have expected like, I don't know. I would have just expected just a smidge more, just a bit more flair to it. Um, this is also another ability I feel like we could have used to incorporate that like floating demon skull motif. If we didn't want to do it on a basic ability, we could have done it on an ultimate potentially, where instead of like the orange red soulfire projectiles, we could have been shooting skulls. That would have been cool, I think. For the giant eye to just release these like infernal skull shaped blasts instead. I think that would have been a nice touch. That would have like, I think that would have added just enough flair to really bring that like, oh, she's threatening element to her. Um, and it would have also been a nice way to like, the reason I've mentioned this like skull motif twice now is because it would have been a nice way to link her to her sister Yurei. And at least with kit visuals, right? It would have been a nice way to like link the both of them together. Um, the skulls could just be like, even if you didn't want to use it as part of like the projectiles or anything like that, the skulls could be like loosely flying around her, or encircling the eye, like anything like that. I think would have really just added that extra dash of seasoning, that special spice to it to really like bring her together, to really sell the idea of like, oh, this is the witch of the rift. Oh, she came to really mess us up. Um and I will say though, it does elicit the feeling of like, oh, this is inevitable. Again, if as I mentioned with the mechanics, the only time you can interrupt her is in that short period when she's channeling to blink to the eye. If you don't interrupt her at that point, prepare to run, right? You have to run. And that is, as I said, you can't interrupt her once that goes off. Um if you if you can spot her in time or get to her in time to interrupt it, sure, you're home free. She's an easy, 1-2, send her back to respawn. But if you don't, um, sometimes it takes a frontliner or a support to sacrifice themselves with whatever CC they might have, to keep her from going anywhere. And that has to be enough. You can't. There's nothing else you can do. And if she decides to pop this, if the Renna decides to wait until like the apex of a team fight and then do this, right? If she's able to get a clean shot at doing this, your team has a very high chance of losing that and losing at least 3 4 people in the process. Um, my only thing again is that I feel like it lacks a little bit of like impact. Again, I use that word loosely because again, I don't think it's bad. I just it feels like it's just missing that extra, fourth of a teaspoon of like salt. Um and I don't know how else to really put this. I I hesitate to say this because like it's a little bit too lore accurate with how like people compare her to her sister, but it, compared to her sister's ultimate, compared to Yuri's ultimate, where she when she goes up in that air and the tornado starts tornadoing and people are just booking it, I don't feel like it has that same oomph, that same like get up and go. I don't know how else to convey that. Like again, I don't think it's bad. I think it does its job. I think it still is very impactful. But like in terms of like oomph, in terms of like, oh, we gotta run, it it does it, but I think it could do it better. If that's something like that. Um like it's again, it's strong. Ooh, excuse me, it's strong numerically, but it doesn't carry over like visually for me. um that's just it. I really think it could be leveled up more, and maybe they didn't do any of the stuff that I'm just kind of like throwing out there because it maybe just didn't align with their idea for the character. That's entirely valid and true. Again, I don't work for them. I'm just a girl on the internet who is happy to talk about these sorts of things. now, um, now that like we've explored the kit a little bit and just kind of like talked about it a little bit, we have to ask, how does how do these elements of her kit come together? And in my opinion, in the games that I've played or played against Renna, you can feel the scaling in her kit. It feels like you're just waiting, counting the souls until your abilities come online. No, I don't mean, when you've picked up an item or two, which is still pretty important to the character. It's like the abilities themselves. You feel them growing. You feel that coming sense of like hitting like a truck and laughing about it as you ult into a fight and run people down as this supposedly like frail mage character. you know the colors and themes of the kit blend seamlessly. We get a taste of the rift, we get a taste of her contract with Acheron, and we flavor it with a witch hungry for power and to prove to people, um and to prove to people all she needed was time and the right resources to rival even the sheer power her sister was coming into. I I only walk away wishing that the kit was, even if only, visually linked to her sister in some way, despite their paths taking them, despite their paths taking them in, wholly different directions, with different outcomes, of course. Um, their upbringing was close and similar enough that, even if Renna abandoned the teachings that her and her sister went through in their course of striving to become Koru Shinzo, there should still be some lingering there should still be some lingering link between her and her sister in terms of how some of their abilities are like executed or displayed. And I know before the pitchforks and stuff happen, I know throughout the history of games, with lore that has siblings, um, and any kind of effect on the actual characters in the game, they don't always line up in that way, right? Having a vastly they sometimes have vastly different combat styles, or themes, and even with that, I feel like there's still some kind of visual link or reference to each other or their origins in their design, if not in their kit. So like, while I love the kit and I think it plays with itself and her visuals well, there's this level or like direction I think could have been taken to strengthen its presentation. Um, and I don't know if y'all agree with that or not, but that's just kind of like the way I kind of walk away from Rena feeling. And finally, we come to the conclusion. Hopefully, y'all have stuck through this. Hopefully, I was able to raise some eyebrows and um, get people to have like a bit of a closer, like direct to the screen look at Renna as we kind of run through her design and just spill a little bit about our thoughts on her, from the kit and abilities to like her actual physical visual design. I would have gone over the skins, but I think we'll save that for another time, right? We'll just talk about like the crux and the core of the character and leave it there. Otherwise, God knows how long these videos could turn into. Which, hey, again, if you have me on as like a podcast of some sort, in the background doing whatever, I really really appreciate that. But I think ultimately, as we as we think about everything that we've discussed so far, where does that leave us? What does this character, what is this character to us and to Sanctuary? Renna is a scaling mid lane mage who saunters around the battlefield in crimson drapery. The primary crimson kinky boots and the tilted boater hat adding a confident yet maliciously pleasant aura. She wields the artifact that brought her the power that she commands, with ease. This cane being just as important to her design as, the metal claws that tip her fingers. The Crimson Witch of the Rift tears through the battlefield, showing the Koro Shinzo obsessed elders what the result of their neglect manifested, as well as the fact that they also made the right choice for not electing her, actually. Um, who knows how the role would have truly affected her, or whether or not she was truly capable of taking it in the first place. Um, Maybe we could have had a timeline where herself and Yurei could have been the first pair of Koro Shinzo in history. That's a timeline we'll never know, unfortunately. The timeline now, though, sees her working as the right hand of the Demon King, potentially buying time to amass enough power for her own, of her own, to raise her own army. Maybe she'll even oppose Acheron for all we know. That's just how unstable her character comes off as. Her kit further exemplifies the idea of amassing power over time when she's in a match. That match is on a timer. For each and every death that occurs, it feeds her. And that essence over time grows to affect every ability she has, making them stronger and, harder to resist or deal with. You cannot and will not ignore her. From Soulfire gaining more and more waves as each threshold of essence is hit, shredding whoever stands in her way, to her ultimate being this inevitable, unstoppable force that you must either kill her through or run if you can. Her reign, her rule over a match is coming, whether you like it or not. With her, while her visuals are striking, they still feel restrained and controlled. Um, and that could be on purpose because of artistic decision, technical limits, or it could be Renna herself. Probably still somewhere in her own mind, regretting what she's done. Maybe, possibly. No one can actually say. Um, Personally, I just wish there were stronger elements connecting her and her sister. From the seasonal promotion art, as I mentioned earlier, I fully expected both sisters to incorporate more of that demonic skull motif. Yurei severs the souls of enemies, which manifests as these skulls, and Renna could have used these same skulls or souls as projectiles, or even in place of the current element used of her echoes. Um, if not that, it would have been nice to have voice lines referring to her sister. These lines could have ranged from taunting her or to even a like rare one where she lets it slip that she's a little bit sad and missing her sister. Heck, even lines talking to or mentioning Acheron even, I think would tie her character together a lot more cohesively. It would bridge kind of those missing gaps, right? It's nice to make speculation, but it more feels like these pieces are just like missing in general. Which as a result weakens her overall kind of, I said this earlier, but like impact for me. Um, this said though, I think Reina effort, I think Rena effortlessly slipped into the roster of Sanctuary. She holds her own without getting lost in the Paragon era heroes, while continuing to establish Omida's heroes' identities. If that makes any kind of coherent sense. It might make more sense in my head than most other things because that's just the way some things go. But hopefully, you kind of understand what I'm getting at. I'm actually going to directly quote my close friend Astro Norimiko, who most of y'all probably know as Nori, because she actually sums it up way more eloquently than I probably could. Renna is one of the most exciting mid laners to play due to how dynamic her kit is and how it blends high risk, high reward mechanics with her own unique personality, cosmetic design, and flair. As a scaling mid lane mage with a demonic pack driven backstory, it's quite the experience to see it blend with her gameplay and identity, making every match feel like a journey from underdog to powerhouse. While her early game vulnerability requires a lot of patience, the payoff for her late game dominance, especially in team fights where she can easily turn the tide and shred multiple enemies, is really satisfying. Renna's combination of power scaling and tactical depth makes her a standout mage, with a playstyle that's engaging as it is challenging, in a way that does not feel repetitive. So, with that, this is Renna, the Crimson Witch of the Rift. I plan on doing more heroes as time goes on. There's not going to be a specific order, just kind of whichever ones speak to me, and I feel like I could do a decent level of like getting some eyes on looking at the design a little bit. Um, and Nyx is telling me that I should probably start wrapping this up because we've been yapping for a minute. um, but hopefully, as the series continues to go on, I hope to refine the method a little bit more, dive a little bit deeper, and really start some topics and discussions about hero designs a bit more, and things we would like to see from future heroes as they continue to roll out. So until next time, this has been me, Empress Tiramisu, and Nyx. Signing off, patrons. Have a lovely time, and I'll see you again. Mwah.